Senator Sessions showdown. The pro-life nominee for Attorney General prepares for a fight. Catholic congressmen on faith.
You know, it really guides me in everything I do in life as a husband, as a father, and as a public official.
We continue our interviews with the newest batch of Capitol Hill Catholics. Reaching for a miracle. More than 1 million Filipinos try to touch a life-size statue of a black Jesus. And the concert has started. Pope Francis jokes about crying babies as he welcomes dozens into the Catholic Church. A look inside the Sistine Chapel baptisms. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, January 9th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President-elect Donald Trump's influential son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will join the White House as a senior advisor. That's according to two people briefed on the decision. He's taking a broad role that could give him sway over both domestic and foreign policy. President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks face a critical week on Capitol Hill with questions about their business conflicts and approach to Russia. We have team coverage. Jason Calvi will tell us how Trump's nominees will shape the abortion debate. First, Wyatt Goolsby has a look at the people being pushed by the transition team. Wyatt.
Lauren, Donald Trump's incoming White House press secretary Sean Spicer says they've spent 70 hours with nominees in mock hearings where they basically grilled them. Now, all of that doesn't include the individual one-on-one meetings with senators. All this to make sure that Trump's appointments are ready for the hot seat.
This may be the most important week yet for Donald Trump's incoming administration. At least 9 of his top cabinet picks will be vetted by Congress. The president-elect isn't worried.
I think they'll all pass. I think every nomination will be, they're all at the highest level.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell met with Trump at Trump Tower. They talked about the Senate confirmation hearings and the policies they want to tackle in the first 100 days.
Everybody will be properly vetted, as they have been in the past, and I'm hopeful that we'll get up to 6 or 7, a particular national security team in place on day one.
The schedule is packed. Tuesday is day 1 of hearings with Senator Jeff Sessions, the nominee for Attorney General. Also on Tuesday, General John Kelly, the nominee for Homeland Security Secretary. Wednesday, Sessions faces more grilling on the Hill. In addition, Betsy DeVos up for Education Secretary, Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, Elaine Chao, Transportation Secretary, and Mike Pompeo for CIA Director.
It's very smart of the Republicans to try to get as many of the nominees scheduled this week as possible.
Hans von Spakovsky knows how contentious Senate hearings can get. He's now with the conservative think tank that's advising the Trump transition team.
They conduct what they call murder boards. And so they have folks come in who pretend to be the various senators that are on the committees, and they ask questions of the nominee. And what I found was that those mock hearings were often tougher than the actual confirmation hearing itself.
Democrats like Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer say the schedule is rushed. They also are very concerned that the Government Ethics Office has still not approved certain nominees based on finances specifically. Lauren?
Wyatt, murder board seems like a very harsh term.
Yes, the term is meant to be harsh. Murder board derives from the military, the Pentagon specifically. It's also known as scrub down. It's meant to be harsh, very critical, so that it's understood that whoever the person is that's getting all the questions will be ready, like we said, for that hot seat.
There's been a lot of criticism about Donald Trump's children being too involved. At the beginning of the show, we reported his son-in-law will play an integral role. What do you think about that?
That's what we're hearing, Lauren, is that Jared Kushner is going to be involved advising the president in a senior advisor role. Now, before he can do that, though, he will have to go through some red tape, some hurdles, so that the government can approve it. He will have to get an exception, basically to make sure that there is not a conflict of interference, because he is involved with Donald Trump's real estate empire, if you will. Lauren?
All right. Wyatt Goolsby reporting at the White House. Thank you, Wyatt. Our team coverage continues with Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. We'll take a look at one of Trump's more controversial picks now, Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions, who's up tomorrow. Jason.
Lauren, Sessions has served here in the Senate since 1997. He was formerly the Attorney General of Alabama. The Republican will face 2 days of confirmation hearings where Democrats are expected to slam him on immigration, race, and even abortion. Sessions is supported, though, by major pro-life groups.
Well, you don't have to wonder where Jeff Sessions stands on the life issue. He has a 100% pro-life voting record.
The Susan B. Anthony list is a group that helps elect pro-life lawmakers. It's backing Senator Jeff Sessions for Attorney General.
I look back to the time when partial birth abortion ban was being considered. He was an original co-sponsor of that legislation, and he was very critical of President Clinton for vetoing it.
Sessions signed on to this letter in 2015 urging the Obama administration to investigate Planned Parenthood. Now, it's no surprise the abortion giant is fighting Sessions' nomination. It comes as the Senate and the House wrap up investigations by referring Planned Parenthood to the Department of Justice for possible criminal charges.
It would be much better if the Department of Justice picked up the investigative work the panel's been doing, because honestly, they have more powers, and I think when they issue subpoenas, they'll have more weight.
With Sessions as the head of the Justice Department, pro-life advocates predict change.
Well, under President Obama, the most pro-abortion president we've ever had, the Justice Department has turned a blind eye to all of these allegations. A Jeff Sessions-directed Justice Department will go after Planned Parenthood, and we will see Planned Parenthood held accountable, and we look forward to that day.
Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut tells me he expects abortion will be brought up in the 2 days of hearings, which begin tomorrow. Trump is dismissing criticism leveled against Sessions.
There's some concern about Jeff Sessions in particular?
No, I think he's going to do great. High-quality man.
Another abortion group, NARAL Pro-Choice America, is also opposing Sessions' nomination. They call him anti-choice because he supported banning abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy, and he also supported defunding Planned Parenthood. Lauren?
Jason, tell us about Senator Sessions' faith and how that's going to play a role.
Well, he's a lay leader of his Methodist church back in Alabama, but still, 50 faith leaders are opposing his nomination because of his staunch view against immigration reform, as well as what they call a racist track record.
And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Thank you so much, Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. The Judicial Crisis Network is a conservative advocacy group supporting Senator Sessions. Joining us now is Carrie Severino, Chief Counsel and Policy Director of the Judicial Crisis Network. Welcome back to the program.
Great to be here.
Let's talk about Jeff Sessions. Democrats are fighting it, saying he's racist, citing allegations from 30 years ago. Are those allegations valid?
Absolutely not. We're talking about decades old, unsubstantiated hearsay, and in many of them it's been absolutely refuted by people in the room. You know, one man said that Sessions he was an African-American attorney. He said Sessions had called him boy. Other people in the room said no, he never said that. He's making it up. Another one, you know, it's things like that where now this is being dragged out again, and it's really discouraging because here's someone who spent decades of his life in public service, is widely respected, and actually cooperated across the aisle. He's got a lot of African Americans that he's worked with lining up and saying, we think he's an excellent man, even some people, some Democrats saying so, and that yet people are bringing out kind of this mudslinging type of rhetoric, which that's discouraging.
And he also has a very strong pro-life record. What do you expect if he is confirmed as Attorney General on that?
Well, he is someone who is very much into the rule of law, and so he's actually going to be enforcing the laws as they stand. So instead of using them sometimes as a political weapon, you saw people being very one-sided. You know, in one case, that it seemed like the Department of Justice was kind of allied with this abortion clinic in trying to get the protesters arrested, and you know, so far that a court criticized them for that. He's not going to be doing these kind of things. He's going to be playing it straight, and I think he will be taking seriously some of the allegations like that Planned Parenthood has been trafficking in body parts. I think unlike Obama's Justice Department, which would dismiss that out of hand because they're such big donors to them, I think he actually has the balance to be able to look at that fairly.
It seems like this is going to be a harbinger of what's to come with the Supreme Court fight.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have his confirmation hearings this week, but we've heard that there may be a Supreme Court nominee as early as around inauguration. So I think that's a huge issue, and it goes even more to all of these important situations going before the country.
Your organization launched a $10 million campaign to support Donald Trump's Supreme Court nomination. What are the big issues at stake?
Well, when you look at the kinds of things Justice Scalia was fighting for in the court, there's so many issues, like religious freedom. There was a bare 5-4 majority for supporting religious freedom, and having someone replacing Scalia who also recognizes that fundamental American value is key. Pro-life issues, really, Justice Kennedy, unfortunately, is a swing vote on that, and he's someone who increasingly has moved to the left, and including in last term had a very liberal decision striking down Texas's abortion regulations. And so I think we'll have to wait for another Supreme Court case to find out where that goes. But I think we need someone who's going to be in the line of Justice Scalia simply to make sure that we're continuing to not invent rights, like the right to privacy, and try to import those policy goals into the Constitution.
Okay. Thank you so much, Carrie Severino, Chief Counsel and Policy Director of the Judicial Crisis Network. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The driver who plowed a truck into a group of soldiers in Jerusalem may have been an ISIS sympathizer. 4 people were killed, 10 others hurt. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says 28-year-old Fadi Kunbar may have supported the terror group. He was shot and killed during the attack. Police have arrested 9 other suspects, including several of Kunbar's family members. And ISIS is not being ruled out for the attack at Fort Lauderdale's airport. Esteban Santiago faced a judge today. He's accused of fatally shooting 5 people and wounding 6 on Friday. He faces the death penalty. We've learned Olga Waltering, a member of the Catholic Church of the Transfiguration in Marietta, Georgia, is among the dead. The parish's priest described her as one of the most joyful, loving, caring, and committed people he's ever met. Francis devotes his annual foreign policy speech to promoting peace at a time of mass migrations, economic stagnation, and violent extremism across the globe.
Il problema migratorio è una questione che non può lasciare alcuni paesi indifferenti.
The Holy Father saying no country can remain indifferent to the problem of migration. His speech to diplomats accredited to the Holy See has become known as the State of the World Address. The Vatican has diplomatic relations with 182 countries. Mary Shovlin joins us from Rome. Mary, let's start with what the Pope had to say about terrorism. What was the real focus of his remarks?
Lauren, first of all, he invited all religious leaders to join him in unequivocally stating that no one can kill in God's name. And he said this kind of fundamentalist terrorism, which is born out of a spiritual poverty, is often linked to a material poverty, and he cited that as being one of the causes of terrorism. He said people who do this, disseminate death, often do so in order to gain power and dominion over other people. But it was his call to all the religious leaders and the political leaders as well that they must work together if fundamentalist terrorism is to be stopped.
It seems he's also calling for a ban on nuclear weapons and the elimination of the arms trade. That's a really tall order, isn't it?
It is, Lauren, and he has talked about this before. I think it's very simple for Pope Francis. When he sees war and devastation, for him in his mind, he says, you can't kill people if you don't have the bullets. And behind the arms trade and behind wars, he sees the very true race for profits. And behind the ban on nuclear weapons that he's calling for, he sees the renewed risk of a renewed arms race around the world, citing specifically the situation in the Korean Peninsula at the moment that's giving him a grave concern. And he's also talking about conventional weapons too, Lauren, and how easy it is for your average person to get one. And in the U.S., of course, alone, we don't have to think back very far to gun violence, which has been plaguing our nation. So he's calling on all kinds of sort of arms limits and controls and hoping to quell violence, and also to promote peace.
Francis has often said we're experiencing a third world war being fought in a piecemeal fashion. Did he mention any specific conflicts that are on his radar?
Well, this yearly speech, Lauren, is a great way to see what's on Pope Francis's radar. And he did mention, first off the bat, Syria. And we know how dear peace in the country of Syria is dear to Pope Francis. We know how important that is to him. So he mentioned Syria, talking about the beloved Syrian people. He mentioned the truce that was recently signed there, saying he hopes it holds as a sign of hope for people in that region. He also mentioned his support, once again, for the two-state solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has been going on for decades. And he also encouraged world leaders and religious leaders to not let these conflicts go on for decades, said that it must never become acceptable to let these conflicts go on so long we can't get used to them. And he also pointed to some positive things as well, the rapprochement between the U.S. and Cuba over the past couple of years, and he noted signs of hope in the dialogue that's going on in Colombia at the moment. So taking a look at the causes of unrest throughout the world and hoping for peace.
All right, Mary Shevlin, thank you so much for joining us from Rome.
Thank you, Lauren.
EWTN is mourning the death of the former president of Franciscan University of Steubenville, known for reinvigorating the school's Catholic identity. He was 85. Father Michael Scanlon appeared on our network in several programs, including Sunday Night Prime. He hosted Franciscan University Presents for 18 years. To read more on the life of Father Michael Scanlon, head to our partners at the National Catholic Register at ncregister.com. Coming up, frozen fountains. Rome copes with unusually cold weather. What the Vatican is doing to help the homeless. And a Christmas trip to Iraq. The Knights of Columbus reveal the plight of Christians in the war zone. Millions of Americans are coping with a blast of winter weather. The Weather Channel reports snow on the ground in every state except Florida. 24 million people are under a winter weather advisory or warning across the southeast, northwest, including Northern California. And as Europe endures a spell of frigid weather, Pope Francis is drawing attention to the plight of homeless people. Icicles hung from the fountains in St. Peter's Square this weekend, and that's an unusual sight. In Italy alone, 8 deaths were blamed on the cold. The Holy Father is praying for the victims.
In questi giorni di tanto freddo,
Francis is inviting us to remember to warm our hearts so we can help those on the streets. The Vatican is distributing sleeping bags, and some Vatican vehicles were left unlocked at nights outside of Vatican City so the homeless could climb in and warm up. They often sleep under Vatican porticos. Iraqi Christians continue their worship despite an almost 3-year genocide at the hands of ISIS. Faced with the destruction of churches and religious symbols, the Christians continue to celebrate their faith. Congressman Chris Smith recently visited Iraq for a first-hand look at the situation. And joining us now is Andrew Walther, Vice President of Communications and Strategy for the Knights of Columbus. And you were out there with Representative Smith in Iraq. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much.
Congressman Smith told us last week that it was sobering. And he said Christians are not getting the aid that they need. What did you see as the greatest need on the ground?
Well, I think what would really make a difference would be aid from the U.S. government and the United Nations, and neither of those entities have been forthcoming, unlike, for example, the Hungarian and Polish government, which have actually given hundreds of thousands of dollars each.
Why not? Why aren't we giving the money?
Well, it's mostly bureaucratic reasons. As I understand it, there is no legal reason for us not to do this. It's simply the fact that the U.S. and the UN and sort of the aid mentality in general prioritizes people that are in imminent danger as individuals of starvation or something else. There's no thought given to group dynamics, even if those groups, as in the case of the Christians, are literally endangered species.
So what are you going to ask the Trump administration to do differently than the Obama administration?
Well, the fix can come one of two ways. Either there can simply be a fix through the agencies that are delivering the aid in terms of prioritizing people whose communities could completely disappear, like the Christians. Or if that doesn't work, then there needs to be specific legislative action that demands that they do this, or there needs to be, basically orders from the top saying, hey, make sure the aid gets to the right people.
Right, and the folks there have lost everything because they just wouldn't renounce their faith. We are looking at some pictures now of all of you there on the ground, and we've been looking at terrible pictures. One earlier that you were telling me about where a gas can was sitting in front of somebody's home, and if they kicked it, it would be, what, a bomb?
Sure. When ISIS pulled out of Nineveh, everybody says, well, these areas have been liberated. This is partially true. ISIS left behind booby traps everywhere, and these are innocuous-looking objects in many cases that are triggered by movement or kicking or something like this. And so the idea that people can just move home is very problematic, in part because many of the homes are rubble, and in part because they're booby traps.
And if we're looking at this picture here, tell us what this is, what we're seeing here.
Well, this is at a refugee camp with Congressman Smith, and this is Archbishop Bashar Warda and Congressman Smith meeting with some of the refugees and eating food with them. That's Father Emmanuel in the center, who was the priest who negotiated with ISIS as they rolled in and gave the congressman a briefing on what that was like and what ISIS was really about in terms of their targeting of Christians.
And how, very quickly with the time we have, how are they practicing their faith if they don't even have homes and things are...
Well, they have churches, and they have, the Christians are all living either in basically shipping containers at worst, or in apartments and homes, which the Knights of Columbus have been a very large sponsor and funder of. So most of the Christians are now out of the camps and into apartment or house dwellings where they're living a couple of families to a unit, and it's much better.
What we would like to do is to have you back and to continue to push the importance of this issue. Thank you so much, Andrew Walther with the Knights of Columbus.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. And more than 1 million Filipino Catholics, mostly barefoot, are joining an annual procession of the Black Nazarene. Participants pushed and shoved, trying to get close enough to touch the centuries-old wooden statue of a dark-skinned Jesus. Many believe it can deliver miracles. The life-size figure is thought to have been brought from Mexico to Manila in 1606 by Spanish missionaries. Up next, Catholic congressmen meet one of the members of the freshman class, how John Faso relies on his faith. And baby baptisms. The Pope cuddles up with the newest members of the church. The Bipartisan Congressional Prayer Caucus exists to protect the right of individuals to pray and practice their faith freely. The leaders for the 115th Congress will be North Carolina Representative Mark Walker, who joins Senator James Lankford as co-chairs of the caucus. Walker's a Baptist who spent nearly 2 decades in ministry. It says prayer should be a uniting force for Congress and for our nation. Now, Lankford is a Baptist who also served full-time ministry for 22 years. One of the new Catholic members of the Congress is Republican John Faso of New York. As part of our series interviewing Catholic congressmen, I talked to him last week and asked what he wants to accomplish in his first term.
Well, I think we have to work very hard to get the economy moving. I think that was the issue that predominated in my upstate New York district. People are concerned about taxes, they're concerned about the cost of living, they're concerned about their children and grandchildren moving away because there aren't the economic opportunities. So that's the biggest issue that I think we face in this election, and that's the issue that I'm going to devote most of my time working on.
We saw a big push on repealing Obamacare from Republicans. What are your thoughts on writing a new health care law?
Well, I think the biggest thing we have to do is we should not make the same mistake which President Obama and Democrats made back in 2010 when they rammed through the ACA. And Nancy Pelosi famously said they have to pass it and then read it so they can know what's in it. That's something we should go into this with our eyes open. Everyone should be able to see what it is. We need to negotiate with all the constituencies out there, consumer groups, the insurers, the medical community, and we have to make sure that we try to get as much bipartisan cooperation in doing so, because that's going to be critical to getting public acceptance.
You have said that you do not support taxpayer funding for abortion. How do you plan on contributing to the pro-life cause?
Well, that's always been my position. I think that it's very important that we preserve the Hyde Amendment in law, and that is something that I ran on as one of the things that I said during the campaign.
How will your Catholic faith guide you as you do navigate Capitol Hill?
You know, it really guides me in everything I do in life as a husband, as a father, and as a public official. Love thy neighbor. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Belief in God, recognizing that there's a higher being than all of us, and that what we need to do here as Americans is not approach these problems just as Democrats and Republicans, but approach them in a spirit of cooperation and conciliation, because we are all Americans and we should try to find common ground as much as possible. My religious training through my Catholic education certainly gave me the spiritual and philosophical guideposts that I hope to follow and continue to follow here in Washington.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, John Faso, a Republican freshman congressman from New York.
Thank you so much.
Repent and you shall be baptized, Peter says, and you shall receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. Pope Francis bestowed that gift on 28 babies in the Sistine Chapel this Sunday. It's an annual tradition started by his predecessor, St. John Paul II.
Hilary, io te battezzo nel nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo.
The Holy Father greeting parents, later telling them it's their responsibility to help children grow in their faith. As the baby's cries grew stronger, Francis joked that the concert had begun. He said that Jesus' first homily was the sound of his cry from the manger in Bethlehem. The newly baptized are all children of Vatican employees, and the ancient ceremony took place in front of this magnificent backdrop of Michelangelo's Last Judgment. That does it for us. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget, you can see every broadcast of the show on EWTN's YouTube channel. I'll see you again tomorrow.